Please welcome Her Worship, the Mayor of Hamilton, Paula Southgate.
Ka te rā te aroha ki te iwi kua nau. Koutou kua whetirangi ki te kahu o te pō. Mā muri nei te whakaaro. Mā muri nei e kōrero. Kua titinga ki te nākau tangata e kapi nei i te whenua. And a translation. I'm consumed with sorrow and love for those who are no longer with us here today. Those who adorn the night skies and shining stars for us all to see and remember. Our thoughts, our stories are etched in the cornerstones of our hearts. Good afternoon, everyone. Warm welcome, first of all, to the Waikato Museum and to Kirikiriroa Hamilton. I'm particularly humbled and honoured to be here today because I know it's the first time that this event has been officially commemorated in Hamilton Kirikiriroa, although we have had smaller commemorations in the past. I know there have been commemorations in Wellington since 2007, Auckland since 2013, and Christchurch. So I'm really, really pleased that Hamilton is now part of national commemoration events so that our city too can formally acknowledge and bear witness to the horrific events that occurred between 1933 and 1945 and the ongoing impact of those. May I begin by formally welcoming US Consul General Sarah Nelson to Hamilton. I understand this is one of your first official outings here since being in your role, and we hope we can welcome you here some more. Welcome, because this is one of New Zealand's best cities. In fact, we were voted New Zealand's best large city not that long ago. My warmest welcome to the Human Rights Commission, and please pass on my regards to Ming, who's a personal friend. Thank you for the important work that the Race Relations Commissioner does make to make New Zealand a better place. Thank you also to Moshe, Malal and Kristopher Clancy from the Holocaust Centre of New Zealand for their work in making today happen. We really appreciate it. It has now been, as you've heard, 77 years since the end of World War II. The work of the Holocaust Centre and other organisations like it is more important than ever. That in itself is a tragedy. The Holocaust Centre inspires and empowers action against antisemitism and discrimination. Importantly, it also fights one of our greatest foes, apathy, by remembering, by educating, by ensuring we can all bear witness to the Holocaust and learn those lessons. And that is what we're here doing today. I doubt anyone needs a reminder of what the Holocaust was, the genocide of 6 million Jews carried out by Nazi Germany and its allies between 1933 and 1945. While the survivors of the Holocaust are now dwindling and direct witnesses of Nazi atrocities are dying, the work of the Holocaust Centre and organisations is not waning, and thank goodness for that. It is a tragedy that in Europe and the United States in particular, there appears to be a resurgence of anti-Semitism alongside the ideology of white supremacism. It's white supremacy. So decades after 1945, this work becomes more important. And let's not kid ourselves. We know, and I certainly know from first-hand experience, that hate speech and discrimination does, sadly, exist here in Kirikiriroa as elsewhere. That is why the very notion of resistance, which the Holocaust Centre promotes, of resisting and pushing back on those kind of beliefs and behaviours and ideologies is so important. I just want to take a bit of time today, though, by talking about what does that mean for Hamilton. We are a city that is home to over 160 different ethnicities and nationalities, different races, different creeds, and different religions. We're also at the very heart of kingitanga, and our partnership with Māori is one of the greatest strengths that we have as a city. More and more, Hamilton is a beautiful cultural mix, and each race and group, in my belief, add and enhance to the flavour, to the wonderful colour and richness of the whole. It's a wonderful thing. In New Zealand terms, our city has had some dark patches in history, and it's important to remember that. And as your speech mentioned before, right now with what's going on in COVID, we're seeing the resurgence of hateful speech that is misdirected and inappropriate. As a city leader, I have instigated and led, and at times therefore, as you do when you are in this position, borne the brunt of conversations about race, culture, history and citizenship. Because it is important that we learn from the past and value all lives and move to a place where we can truly value each other as equals. I have resisted the option to say nothing, to do nothing. It possibly would have been easier when you think about certain statues and other issues of those types. But if we're not here to do right, why are we here at all? In a culturally diverse and rich city like Hamilton, there is no place for racial division. I want a city that embraces diversity and enriches the lives of all our citizens. The differences should not unite us, but they should divide us. Like others, I've been chastised, castigated, and even threatened for saying things which make people feel a little uncomfortable. In those times, I take some solace from good friends like Ming Foon, and I've spoken to him at length about that. But what is more important is that people in our city are calling out that behaviour and embracing topics that I believe the majority want to be heard, and they want strong, positive change. I've been heartened by that response to courageous conversations that go to the very heart of what it means to live in a fair and just community. But I acknowledge that we're only at the very beginning of these. That is why today is so important, 77 years later. Remembering the Holocaust is important for all of us. It is the work of the organisations such as the Holocaust Centre in New Zealand that make it easier for us to call out hateful speech and hateful attitudes and forms of discrimination. The reality is that the human race is always good at seeing what is right here in front of us, but we can take a bit longer to digest and to understand, albeit abhorrent acts that are happening far away from us. Easier to put them out of reach, out of sight, out of mind, if you like. In researching this speech, I read again about a report from a BBC reporter, Richard Dimbley. Dimbley was the first broadcaster to enter the Bergen-Belsen death camp after it was liberated on April 15th, 1945. I will add, I have never been there, but I have been, my husband has, and I have been to Dachau. Dimbley broke down several times during his report, and initially his managers back in London refused to play that report because it was far too emotive. And they simply could not comprehend or believe the scenes that he was describing and relaying. But he threatened to resign unless that report was broadcast. And so 2 days later, albeit a very heavily edited version of the report went out, and the truth and the scale began to be known. For the first time, the British public heard from a trusted source of what had occurred at Belsen. And so the discussion of the Holocaust began. Decades later, as I said before, it's both a tragedy and a triumph that the discussion is still continuing. Right here in this museum today, I'll just make a note that there was an exhibition about the Springbok tour and the protests around that. And of course, that is relevant. We must continue to fight at every turn against the despicable ideology and hatred that led to a systemic and planned and meticulously planned out meticulously mapped plan to exterminate Jews and all of those other people for their points of difference. And we must continue to do the same with racism in this city. And in fact, wherever we see it, we must call it out. Work to ensure it is never considered even remotely acceptable, not today, not ever. But it is a triumph that despite ongoing challenges, despite the refusal of the minority to accept that their ideologies can be fundamentally wrong, that most people do. I'm a bit of an optimist, I have to say. I sincerely believe most of us want to do what is right. Holocaust Remembrance Day reminds us again why this is so important. So this is why I welcome this event in the city. I hope it becomes an annual occasion from which we can draw lessons on. And I hope that in future occasions I will be able to stand here and talk about the progress that Hamilton City Council has made in terms of some of its courageous conversations. And I just want to give a big shout out to an ex-mayor of New Orleans, Mitch Landra, who shared with me his experiences with the colonial statues in New Orleans and the terrible time he suffered for 2 years to achieve that result. Hamilton's got work to do. So I want to just finish by saying, Mia Zainen Do. We are still here. Ngā mihi no iwi kia koutou katoa.